Hello, everybody. How are you doing? I'm Rohan from Finsweet and Wized, and today we have Alex, the CTO of Finsweet and the product owner at Wized. Alex, how are you doing today?
Hey, y'all. I'm good. Happy to be here as always. So, hello to everyone.
Great, and I think it's our first stream together, so I'm really looking forward to how everything goes out.
It is. It is. This is actually, I'm very excited for this.
Let's say hi to some people in the audience. I see Glenn is here. Nice to see you, Glenn. Teo, hi. Jeremy, good to have you here. Magdalena and Vishwanath. So glad to have so many familiar people here in the chat today. So, without further ado, let's get on with our live stream. So, some announcements to begin. Reminder that we changed our Twitter handle name from GetWized to Wized App. So, please make sure to follow us on the new account that is Wized App. Next reminder, we had a collaboration with Blackpeak to create the Black Market. It's a marketplace where you can share your clonables, sell components, do lots of things. It's not launched yet, but please register your interest. Next, we shared a feedback form about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We received so many comments and we were happy to see it all. We have responded to them, we have discussed them internally. So if you have anything that you'd like to share directly with the team, please submit that Airtable form that Victoria will share. Then, another crucial update. Last time when Joe and Alex did a live stream, they showed a preview of all the features that will be launched. The features like the new code editor, pricing, or embed v2 were not launched, but we only showed a preview. We want to make that clear because we noticed there was some confusion within the community regarding the status of those updates. Speaking of which, Alex, when can we expect these new features to be released?
Yeah, yeah. Full pressure, first thing. But I
Sorry.
can I can say to everyone that all of those features are coming in less than a month. Okay. I don't have a specific date for the launch, but I know that we're currently aligned. We had a lot of things going on, and we want to make sure that the launch is as smooth as possible. And I know that it's going to happen hopefully before July, because that's exactly less than a month.
Great. Good luck with that, and we'll keep you all updated. A few more things. So we released a few resources over the last couple of weeks. One was a chart.js clonable. So Emmanuel shows us how you can have charts in your Wized web app. And then Emmanuel released a few articles on our intelligence center, all to do with naming conventions for elements, actions, and more. And at any time, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of every section. Now, on to the intro. So, Alex, how is today's live stream going to benefit the users?
Yeah. Okay. So essentially, with the we're gonna talk about four fundamentals to master Wized, and I think that by knowing those four fundamentals, you'll be able to, as a no coder, as somebody who never wrote a single line of code, you will still be able to master Wized as if you were a developer. So if you're a developer, obviously Wized helps a lot because there are many concepts that Wized relies on that are essentially just development. The same way as if you knew HTML and CSS before starting using Webflow, you'd also have an easier path to master the platform. Same happens with Wized. If you know a little bit of programming, you always have that extra push, extra ease to master the platform. So the four fundamentals that we're going to touch today are the four things that we believe are going to help you a lot improve both as a programmer and also mastering Wized itself.
Great. And so, do you have any particular reasons that why we narrowed it down to these four concepts to be the fundamental to master Wist?
Hmm. Well, essentially, because these four concepts are what we use in Wist to build the applications. So with these four concepts, you can essentially handle everything that goes from the UI reactivity to sending out data and receiving data and showing that data on the side, which kind of groups all the features that we offer in Wized. I mean, it's quite a very small summary of everything that you could do. You can do a lot of things in Wized, but the fundamentals are these ones. So we based the application on these fundamentals. If you learn them, it's going to help you a lot use the platform.
Great. And I guess more importantly, at least for me, do people need to have a prerequisite in order to better understand the concepts that we will show today?
No, no prerequisite. You can always be better at it if you really have a lot of knowledge in the field, but it's not a prerequisite at all. And I want to think that Waste can be the same as Webflow has become to many people, which is a path, a tool to actually learn HTML and CSS in the case of Webflow, because when you're using the tool, you end up learning how the web works. You end up learning how things are being built in the background. And our goal is for Wiz to be the same, but for the JavaScript side, which would be the additional layer of logic that goes on top of your sites to make them reactive, to create applications instead of just static sites. So no prerequisite. Hopefully, Wiz can become that tool that helps you overcome and be better as a developer.
Great. And my favorite question, can we use ChatGPT to help us write some of these code items?
Of course,
Snippets,
yes, we can.
that's the word. Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
fantastic. So we'll see some examples further into the stream then. Okay, so starting off, the first fundamental is variables. So Alex, what are variables?
Okay. So variables. If we go to the definition of what's a variable in JavaScript, it's essentially, to say it in a no-code way, it's a container for a value. And I think that you laid it down perfectly when you were originally planning this stream. Um, this definition is by Rohan, by the way, not by me. And it's that, so essentially you have a value, and that value you're going to use it for anything, and that value needs to be accessible in some way. So that value is being stored in the memory of the computer, and then we have direct access to it. And variables are essentially this: we're taking a value and we're putting it inside a container, so then we can use it for anything that we need in the application.
Great. So essentially, variables are containers for the values.
Yep. Yep.
Perfect.
Correct.
Okay, so how or what are variables used in Wized?
Yep. This is actually the key part of how Wist works, especially when it comes to handling the UI state. So in an application that you're building with Wist, anything that you see happening on the screen, meaning an element that it's being added or removed, or a list that it's being rendered, or an element whose color is changing, or the text of some other element is being populated, anything is always based on state, on variables that are holding the directives for the that the UI should be reacting to. Okay, everything in Wist, we tend to call it that it's reactive, meaning that these containers that hold some values, the UI of the site will react to them somehow. When a value of a container of a variable changes, Waste will know how to properly update the site to reflect it. And a very simple example would be, for example, having a true or false variable. So a Boolean variable that it's holding either true or false. And maybe you want to tie that true or false to something that is happening in the UI. Maybe there's an element that should be hidden or it should be displayed. Whenever you change that value in the variable, Wist is going to handle for you all the reactivity. It's going to handle for you all the actions that need to happen for the UI to reflect that new state. So essentially, a variable, it's controlling the entire application. Variables are essentially the core of Wist reactivity.
Great. So from my understanding, variable is like a trigger. If it shows this, then do that. Am I right in thinking like that?
More than a trigger, let's call it a condition.
Okay.
So a condition that is dynamically evaluated. So we check if the condition, what's the result of that condition, based on what what the variables are providing.
Okay. And Alex, can you please tell us the list of variables that we can use in Wized?
Absolutely. And at that point, maybe it's easier if we share our screen. What do you think?
Sure. Let's do that.
Okay. Thank you, Gabe. Do you see how an amazing team we have here with smooth transitions?
Great.
Okay, so
Alex,
I'm actually
sorry.
going to
Could
show
you
you.
please
Go ahead.
could you please zoom in?
Absolutely. What
Thank
about
you.
now?
Uh,
I
can
can
you
do
go
an
one
extra more.
more?
Nope,
Oh,
I can't.
okay.
We reached the
Okay,
limit.
perfect.
I'm
Good
sorry.
enough.
Okay. I'm actually just going to list the variables at the same time as I show you how to create them. Maybe then it can give some extra context to people. But essentially, when you have an open project in Wist, you have the section in here that is called page data. In this page data, it's essentially what I mentioned before, and it's the data, the state of the application that it's going to manage, that it's going to handle everything that is going on the application. Okay. So when we open this, we have a few things listed here. We can see that there are variables, there's then navigation, cookies, input fields, and then there are a couple more missing that I'll mention later. Okay. So variables are just essentially variables that me as a user can define. These are things that in a future I might want to mutate somehow. So for example, I have here already a variable that is called visible, and it's currently true, but maybe in the future I want to change that variable value, and because of that change, something can happen in UI. Maybe something that was supposed to be visible, it's no longer visible, and then should be reflected on what you see on the side. Okay, so user defined variables created here. Okay, next we have navigation variables. Okay, this actually includes two different things. It includes variables that are pre-filled by Wist. So these are things that you cannot control and instead are controlled by the current place where the user is. One is the variable that holds the current URL. So if I'm navigating through the site, there is this href URL that contains already pre-filled by Wist the current URL, and then the path, which would be the part of the URL that is just the folder's path of it. Okay. But then we can also add new variables that reflect the query params of the Wist application of the site. So whenever I create something, let's say, I don't know, my value, whatever. Okay, this is something that will be populated by Wist whenever we load the site with that query param in place. So if I go to example.com and then question mark my value equals to 1234, that 1234 will be populated by Wist automatically, which is really great when you want to offer dynamic experiences based on a URL. So maybe dynamically load different content, maybe gating something. We don't know. It's up to you. And next would be the cookies variables. Okay. In this case, essentially are variables that get populated by the cookies values, meaning that if I come here and I say my cookie, for example, I can define the lifetime of it. And in this case, I'm just going to set it to 1 day. And now we have this cookie here. And whenever we change the value of this cookie, Wist is going to handle both writing the cookie in the user browser, and then the next time that the user loads the site, Wist will be able to retrieve that and also populate it in the data store. That's what we call the actual state of the application with the proper value. So this is also something that you can use whenever, for example, you're handling authentication. So maybe you're gating a site and you want to make sure that the user is logged in. You can store that in a cookie, for example. or anything else that you can come up with. Okay. The fourth type of variable, it would be input fields. And this one in particular, it's mm, just populated by Wized. Whenever you have an input field that is defined, so you add the Wized attribute to it, Wized will already just grab the value of that input, and anytime that the user is typing into the input, it's just going to update that. So for here, we can see that, for example, we have a list slider that it's currently set to 50. And if I change this, you can see how it's automatically being populated with the current value of the input in here. Okay, so this means that Wiz keeps track of this, and whenever it changes, the variable is changed, and anything in the UI that depends on that variable, it's also going to be changed. Everything is reactive, everything is changed. Okay, so there are
Alex,
two more that I should mention. Go ahead.
yes, before you continue, I have a question. So I noticed that fields does not have a plus sign. So how do we create more input fields?
Oh, as I mentioned, input fields, it's not a variable that you explicitly create in Wist. It goes the other way around. You go in Webflow, you define the input field with the Wist attribute. And then the next time that you come to the project or that you refresh the page, Wiz will detect that input. So then it knows that, okay, hey, there's an input there. I should be keeping track of the value of that input. I'm just going to store it in this variable that I created for you.
Okay, and is it just the Webflow form fields that can be input fields, or can it be
And
anything?
yeah, so it can be anything from input, select, dropdowns, and text areas. So it can be anything. It can be a checkbox, it can be a radio, it can be a text input, a number input, it can be a dropdown, select dropdown, or it could be a big text area element. Okay. And adding to that, you don't see it right here because I'm showing the current version of Wist. But in the new upcoming updates, so I'm gonna make some hype again to the people. In the new upcoming updates, there's gonna be an additional variable that it's no longer just input; it's gonna be entire forms. So you as a developer will not have to be manually identifying every single input that you want to track. And instead, you will be able to just define a form. And whenever the user submits that form, the values are going to be stored in that variable. Okay. I think that I did a demonstration, or at least I talked about in the live stream where we presented these updates. But you can expect more content about this to come soon. Okay. And I think that we can move on to the last type of variables. And in this case, it's the requests data. Okay. You probably already know, but in Wist, you can send data and you can get data from a server. Okay. And everything that involves that process, meaning the status of the request, the response of the request, well, the status code of the request, the response, sorry, the payload that was received from the server, everything, all the data that it's tangible that we can use somehow, it's stored in the variables that are called requests. So, for example, I have here a request where I loaded a bunch of Pokemons. Okay, the result of that request, so the response, it's available to me using the R um, symbol. And in that case, it contains a bunch of things. It's not a single variable. It's an object that contains multiple properties, and I can access all of them to use them also in the UI. So whenever that changes, my UI can also change. And that's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And later in the week, maybe next week, I will share all of that in a nice tweet thread. So watch out for that.
Nice.
Once again, a reminder, if you have any questions for us, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we will answer to each one of them. So moving on, the second concept, expressions. So Alex, what are expressions?
Okay. I'm going to just mention the definition of the Mozilla documentation, but then we can expand it a little bit more. But the official definition of an expression, it's a valid unit of code that resolves to a value. Okay, this might sound confusing, but essentially, I'm just going to give you a very simple example. A mathematical operation, it's an expression. So when you do 2 plus 2 equals to 4, the result being 4, that's the result of an expression. The expression was 2 plus 2. So essentially, an expression, it's just um, a definition of something that resolves to something else. It can be some arithmetics, it can be some comparisons, it can be logical things like some two things should be true at the same time. Anything we I think that we got more into depth in the different type of expressions. But essentially you can think of it as just a statement that resolves to something. Okay. And in Wized, it's what we use to make changes in the UI. I think that we can get more in depth into that.
Oh, yes, definitely. Please show us how we can use expressions in Wized.
Okay. So, by the way, disclaimer for everyone: everything that you see now, it's the current version of the embed. It's the current version of the Wist, and it's not reflecting some of the upcoming updates that are going to come. Although later in the stream, I'll make like a quick sneak peek of one of the features that you've already seen in the past, but I don't know if you've seen it actually being used. Okay. So let's go back here, okay? And let's imagine that I have this button and it's already working. I want to toggle the visibility, okay? Let's remember that if we want to tie something that is happening in the UI, um, we just need to have a variable that it's defining it, right? But the moment that we want to update the variable or we want to trigger some conditions for a request or anything like that, we can use expressions. And let me show you what I mean by that. So imagine that I have this variable that it's defining the visibility of this element, okay? And I want to change that value to the opposite of it. So currently it must be true. And I want to change that to the opposite, which would be false, right? So I just have to write an expression that does exactly what I just said. I want to take the variable that it's defining the visibility, and I want to resolve to the opposite of that. Okay, so we can just go into actions. I'm going to show you the predefined um, action that we have here, and the expression is exactly this one. Oh, not this one. Sorry. Well, actually, this one is already an expression because we're defining that the element should be visible whenever the result of just this be visible, it's true. Okay. But this could be more complex. It could be if it's visible and the user is logged in and there is some data that has been loaded. The expression's length, the amount of logic that you put in expression, it's up to you. Okay. And then when we want to trigger a change, when we want to switch the visibility from being visible to not being visible, we can write another expression. And it's as simple as saying, hey, on click, just set the value of a variable to a new value. And in that case, the expression that we have written to define that new value, it's just saying the opposite. So take the variable and please return the opposite of it. Okay. You probably have seen this, and if you're not familiar with Wist, the current way where we handle expressions, it's by defining these double curly braces. So anything that you see in double curly braces, it's essentially defining an expression. It's Wist expecting you to write some expressions in JavaScript that resolve to something. In this case, the opposite of be visible.
Alex, one, maybe two questions there. So you are saying the opposite of visible by simply adding that exclamation mark, which inverts
Correct.
the value, right? Okay.
Correct.
And, and second comment, visible, that is the name of the variable, right?
Yes. Correct. If
So
I
we could have
go
named it
back to
anything,
the
even.
Yeah, that's correct. So if I go back to general where I have my variables of the application created, you will see that I have a variable that it's visible equals to true. And whenever I click on it, it becomes false because the expression that it's being evaluated when we click on the button, It's saying, hey, I want to resolve to the opposite of it. If it was true, it becomes false. If it was false, it becomes true. Okay. And the exclamation mark that you see there, that's actual JavaScript. That's how we write expressions in JavaScript. And in the case of negating something, of getting the opposite of a Boolean value, it's just that exclamation mark.
Great. So Teo had asked a question, and I think you just answered it. His question was, what programming language are expressions written in? And it's JavaScript.
JavaScript. Yeah. Yeah. As
Perfect.
mentioned, Wized is the extension of JavaScript for your Webflow sites. So the same as in Webflow you're writing HTML and CSS, in Wized you are writing JavaScript in some way.
Great. Good to know that connection. So moving on, the third concept, functions. So Alex, what are functions?
Okay. Okay, I'll try to be be as non-technical as possible. But essentially, when we have an expression, we just have a defined statement that resolves to something, right? But many times that's not enough, because you could have multiple conditionals, or you would need, maybe you have some extra logic that you need to run before being able to evaluate that condition. So there are more moving parts, and you have to kind of group them to run all together. Okay. So in a function, we just can either just return a single expression, which would be a very simple function, or we can just go further and we can have multiple expressions that resolve to something, and then we use those multiple expressions to resolve to something else. And that's what the function it's returning, etc. The official definition of a function, it's something that takes an input and returns an output. So in our case, the input would be the state of the application, all the variables, all the cookies, all the navigation, blah, blah, blah. We process all of that, and from it, we can return an output. But we are not limited to just writing a single expression. We're actually able to write any logic we want. In a future, we'll be able to run other functions that also probably return some value that you also want to use to in your computation. Do any logic that you want, and then from the function explicitly return what you want. And you don't have to just return one single thing. Maybe you want to return multiple things. And we actually are going to show you a very simple example that will reflect that in a second. But maybe if one condition it matches, then maybe you want to return something. If another condition matches, maybe then you want to run some logic and then return something from it, etc. So functions is just a group of expressions plus extra logic that you can write in it to help those expressions evaluate to what you need.
Great.
Was I too technical
So
there?
no, but I will try to simplify it. We
Okay.
we've gone through three concepts. Variables are essentially containers for values. We use variables inside of expressions. So when something changes in that variable, the expression will give you an output according to that change. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
functions can contain a group of expressions.
Mm-hmm.
So
Correct.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah, great. So I've understood the concept well then. Okay, so can you please show us how we can use functions in Wist?
Yeah. I think that we can do that at the same time as we ask ChatGPT to write it. What do you think?
Perfect. Yeah, let's do
Yep.
that.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just gonna open ChatGPT. I know that we all love it, and it can help us a lot. And I'm going to ask it to write some logic that it makes sense to be grouped inside a function, because it's going to be the function will define an input and an output. The input is going to be the state of the application, so all the variables or the cookies, whatever we need for that, and the output is going to be based on the logic that we write from it. Okay, and the example is going to be very simple. We're doing an alcohol test where police people came, and we're going to make sure that people who are driving can drive. And just for the sake of the demo, we're gonna differentiate between ages and sexes and the level of alcohol that they have in their blood. Okay, so we can define something like, if you're a guy and I don't know, your blood level, it's so the alcohol in your blood level, it's something bigger than 0.25, and also you are older than 21 years old, you can drive. Otherwise, you cannot drive. Okay, and maybe for women, we can make up something else, like, I don't know, if your blood level it's higher than zero point 0.2, and then if you're older than 18 years old and you're a woman, then you can drive too. And please, I'm just making this stuff up, so hopefully I'm not generating controversy here, just for the sake of a demo. Okay, so let's just ask that to ChatGPT. Okay, so let's say, can you please write? Whoops. When I write in live stream, I completely forget how to type. Okay, so don't mind me. Can you please write a JavaScript function that um, defines if a person is allowed to drive? Okay, and we'll say um, men are allowed to drive only if they are older than 21 years old. They have less than, what did I say, 25 milligrams
Zero. Yes, that's correct.
of alcohol in their blood, and they are men. So that's it. Okay. So I'm gonna say and this, and then I'm gonna say women are allowed to drive only if they are older than 18 years old, and they have less than zero point 0.2, I think I said, milligrams of alcohol in their blood. Okay. So if I ask that, let's see what is happening here. Okay. So we've got a function, but now actually I forgot to tell ChatGPT that our variables are in the format of Wized. So I'm actually gonna copy again this, but I want to give extra context to ChatGPT, and I'm gonna say the variable for that reflects the person age is located at b.age. Okay, like that. Age. The variable that defines the person's sex is located at v.sex. Okay, this notation, the v dot something, is what we use to access variables in Wized. And the variable that defines the person's, what am I missing? Al- alcohol level in the blood.
Yes.
In blood is v dot alcohol, like that. Okay. Well, let's wait again. Let's hope that ChatGPT understands us. Okay. Kind of. I think it. Oh, but well, that could be valid. So instead of returning a valid, because I was hoping it to return true or false, I could explain it to ChatGPT, but I think that's still a good example. It's just showing a message if you're allowed to drive or you're not allowed to drive. Okay, so hopefully you can see that a function can hold as many blocks of logic as you want. So as opposite to an expression that it's just expecting you to return one single thing, or maybe you could do multiple things um, if you chain ternary statements, but it kind of becomes very cumbersome. Here with a function, I can just define all the logic. If the sex is this and the age is that and the alcohol is that, return something, and otherwise do something else, etc. And inside this function, we could even add more logic. We could be calculating things. We could be running other functions that define what's the output of the function. Okay, so we have a function. Now I'm going to show you how we'll be able to use functions in the upcoming update. Okay, this is an early preview. So I'm not going to show it actually working. I'm just going to show the UI so you can see exactly what's going to look like. Okay, but essentially, let's imagine that we have this action that it's display alcohol message in here. Okay, and this has been applied to some random element. I don't care. In the configuration, it's just going to set the text. And I'm going to assume that all these variables exist. So you will see errors going on because these variables do not exist, but I'm going to assume it for the sake of the demo. Okay. So I just need to get the inners of the function. We don't have to define the function itself, and I'll talk about this in a second. Okay. We just have to get the inners of the function. And now here we have a full code editor with IntelliSense syntax. This is using the same thing as VS Code. So you will have auto completion for anything that you would like to type, etc. And in this case, I can add this function in here. Okay. So now, supposedly, if everything was working fine, anytime that a variable, either sex or age or alcohol, changed, the text to the element, because I just defined an action for text, would be reflecting the output of this function. Okay. So in this case, kind of there, but a few things missing because the setup it's not fully done. Okay. I just want to point out something that you will see in the final version of this, and it's that the functions that you will be writing will not just look like this; they will look more like this. Okay, and this is more for the technical people. It will look more like this, and you will have access to all the data store. So it will be variable, cookies, inputs, forms, requests, and navigation. Okay, so you will not have to write this. This will be pre-populated by Wized. Okay, this is something that you will have as extra context for the function that you're writing. You will just have to worry about the insights of the function. Okay, and as I mentioned, we have access to the variables. We can use them. We can have access to anything else, and we can return whatever we want to the function. And hopefully, I did not confuse people here.
No, this all looks great. I have a couple of questions. So, the reason you copied just the inside bit of it is because Wizd is going to have that extra bit
Yeah,
pre-populated. Is that right? Okay,
yeah, correct.
perfect. And since Embed 2.0 is not yet launched, how can people use this in Embed 1? Can we just copy and paste like you did, or are there some
Yeah.
workarounds required?
So actually, the data field editor, it's the only update that we're gonna push that will be compatible with both the embed one and the embed two. And what we're going to do is just make a migration of all the expressions and convert them to proper functions. You will not have to do anything as a user. So the moment that, for example, you have an expression that it's the one that I shared before, that it was the opposite of visible, instead of being just a single expression that it's written in these double curly braces, it will be automatically converted to a function that will look like this. So very similar, but much more powerful at the same time, because then it's not just going to be an inline expression where Wized expects you to write a very simple expression. Instead, it's going to be a function that at any point you'll be able to expand with actual logic. Hopefully, you'll be able to reuse in a future when we introduce the reusability of functions concept, okay, which is still being defined. It's not being worked on yet, etc. But this is kind of like the clear path to move forward and allow people to have the full flexibility of a JavaScript framework, which is kind of what Wist is, or tries to replace at least.
Great. Thank you so much for explaining that. Glenn is asking, will those functions be reusable across the app rather than defined in the data field?
That's the plan. So the good thing of having a function is that a function, it's like this black box where you have some logic and you can add an input and you can expect an output from it. Okay. The input, it's the state of the application, all the variables, cookies, inputs, forms, requests, and navigation state. And the output is whatever you decide to return from the function. So thanks to this new update that we're doing, we will be able to see in the future reusable bits of logic.
Great. All right. So if you have any more questions, please put them in the comments and we will definitely respond to them. Now, on to the fourth and the final fundamental concept, HTTP, HTTP requests. So, Alex, what are they?
Okay, so now we're touching the other part of the Wized platform, and it's what's missing. So far we've talked about how we handle the UI. So anything that that updates the state of the application and it's then reflected on the UI. But the missing part is communicating with servers, right? And this is also one of the huge features that Wist offers to anyone who's building an app in Webflow. It's the ability of retrieving data and sending data, or as we display in the Wist application in the configurator, it's doing data in and data out. Okay. Essentially, it's just loading data on the application so you can use it and sending data out of the application so you can store it, you can delete it, you can update it, you can do anything with it. Okay. And these are essentially HTTP requests. Whenever you're retrieving data, you're making an HTTP request. Whenever you're sending data, you're also making an HTTP request. Okay, so we're gonna break this down in actually two parts of what happened in an HTTP request. That's the concept that I want everyone to understand. What's happening when you're retrieving data or when you're sending data? Okay, and in both cases, you are doing two things. You're sending out a request and you're getting back a response. Okay, whenever you want to retrieve some data, you're sending out a request saying, hey, I want to get this data. And then the server answers you back with a response. Here's your response. Maybe the response contains the data, or maybe it doesn't, because something could happen that it doesn't work well. Maybe the server was expecting you to be a paid user, or maybe the server was expecting you to provide some extra context in the request. Okay, and then as I mentioned, you're getting back a response. Okay, am I getting too far in the questions, or am I good there?
No, you're good. I think it's perfect.
Okay. Okay, then, well, the two base things that I wanted to mention is this: it's we're doing a request and we're getting a response, and this happens both when we're retrieving data and when we are sending data. It doesn't matter the direction of the data, because in both cases we have these two actions happening. We send a request, we get a response. Okay, so if we want to get more in depth to understand what's actually a request, what's actually a response, how do they work, like, okay, there are two concepts that I wanted to introduce in this live stream today, and it's the HTTP methods, and the other one it's the HTTP code, HTTP response codes. And you probably already guessed it, but when we are sending a request, we have to specify the server, like, what are we doing? Are we asking to retrieve some data? Are we asking to update some data? Are we asking to delete some data? Okay, the HTTP method will reflect that, and that's included in the request that we're sending. Okay, and as I kind of hinted before, the response from the server could be different based on many scenarios. Maybe you're not a paid user, you're not authenticated, you did not provide enough context in the request. So the server, it's not always going to respond the same to everyone. Okay, some response can be successful, some response can be unsuccessful. But inside this, we even have more ways of defining if how did the response go. Did I get the proper data, or was I missing to pass some information to the server? Was I missing to be identified? Did the server just redirect me somewhere else? Did the server just break, like it didn't know how to handle that, and it just, you know, broke the and didn't return a proper response? So all of these things are communicated with what we call the status codes, the HTTP response status codes. Okay. Um, should we share something with the screen? Should we share a link there? Because I think it's nice to go deeper in there if people can.
Sure. If you have something to share, let's do that. But I just wanted to summarize what I understood. So there are two things. One is HTTP methods. So these are actions that
Hmm.
you're requesting. So there's get, post, patch,
Hmm.
delete.
Correct.
And then based on that action request, the server gives you a response. And those are
Correct.
response codes. 200 is successful. And then I know there are some others in 100 and 300s, but I don't really remember what they are. But I'm hoping you will tell us.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly it. There's one missing key here, and it's something that can be both in the request and in the response, and it's the payload. Okay.
Right, of
Whenever
course.
you're requesting something, maybe you're not just sending the request with anything else. Maybe you want to send some extra things in the payload. Like maybe I want to have a payload that defines the object that I want to delete. So I want to delete this image from the server. In my payload, I'm going to include the information that the server is expecting, so the server knows exactly what image is being deleted. Or maybe just updating. Maybe I want to update something from the server or whatever, any kind of request. And the response also includes the payload, because the response, when it comes back to me with whatever I requested, that data will be in the payload. So all of this, the request method when sending out a request, the payload then we include in the request, and then the response and the payload that is included in the response, and the HTTP status code that define how did the response go like, all of this, it's usable, it's accessible in Wist. And that's the key part. This is what allows us to create fully interactive sites that can communicate with the server, because we can have access to all of these parts of the workflow. Okay. And maybe I can show you, because I'm already sharing my screen. So we can just circle back to all these bits of information that I shared by showing you how this load 100 random Pokemons request looks like in Wist. Okay. When we're loading something, we're getting data in. And in this case, if we're talking specifically about how the request looks like, it probably looks it probably using a get HTTP method, because we're saying to the server, hey, I want to get some Pokemons from you. So we're sending out a get request. So all the data in requests that you create in Wist are automatically get requests. Okay, and inside it, not only I'm just sending that request to the endpoint without anything else, we're passing some extra things. We're passing some parameters in the URL to define that I want it to be limited to 100, and I want also to have some offset so I can get random Pokemons. But also I could be adding some headers too. I could be adding anything. So this is what I'm sending to the server. This is my request. Okay, and the
Is that the
response, it's what
payload?
comes. Well, actually, in this get request, we're not sending a body. So if you understand the payload as the body, then it would be just for the data out. But if we understand the payload as all the information that we're giving in the request, so headers, parameters, body, etc., then in that case, it would also be a payload. I don't know the specific definition of a payload, so I don't want to mess this up. So I'm just going to say that probably this is the payload. Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I'm not being 100% accurate. I don't want to share false bad info. Okay. Okay. So let's just trigger this and see what it looks like when the server is coming back to us. We've sent the request, and what we see here, it's the response. And the response, as I mentioned before, it's just stored in a variable in Wist. It's stored specifically in the R key. So in this key. So from here, we can use this to access it from anywhere on the application. Maybe we want to use the results to create a list, and this is what we're doing. We're taking all the results and we're creating a list from it. Maybe we want to populate the text from the elements with each Pokemon. So each Pokemon here, it's being populated it with the text of that Pokemon because we have access to the response payload that includes this information. But we also have extra information. We also can see how did the response behave, the state of the response. We can see if the response is requesting, and this is something for convenience, because maybe you want to show a loader, maybe you want to do something while the request is loading. Okay. Um, and also we can access the status code of it. So for example, a 200, as you mentioned, means that it was successful. But not only 200 could be there. Let's open up the Mozilla documentation. We could have 100s, we could have
Can you zoom in,
200, we could
please?
have 300s, 400s, 500s. And just knowing the concept of an HTTP method will help you properly manage the application. Okay. So for example, maybe the response is a 401. This means that I was not authorized to call this. Maybe the server was expecting me to be logged in, and maybe was expecting me to be an admin. I don't know. And because of that, when I'm writing the logic for Wized, when I'm handling all my application, I can define a specific rule if I want to handle this case. Hey, the user is not logged in. What can we do about it? Can we redirect him to the login page? Can we just show a warning message? We can do anything because it's under our control. Okay. And this, as I mentioned, is accessible from the variable that Wiz populates from the R in this case. I think that's it.
Great. Yeah. Awesome. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I see we've got a couple of questions, so we'll go over them. So
Sure.
Teo is asking, do we need to tell ChatGPT to write the code in a certain way for it to work in the current version of Wist?
Yeah. The problem that you might encounter with the current version of Wiz is that the fields where you can write expressions are kind of a waste way of doing things. So it's not really real JavaScript. So when you go and write something like hello and then double braces, and inside that double braces you write a variable, for example, that's not really JavaScript. This is some specific syntax that just applies to Wist. So you will kind of have to explain that to Wist to understand how the expressions are expected to work. But in the new version, we're migrating away of this type of syntax, and we're just using JavaScript functions. Any JavaScript code that you write inside the data field editor, once it's released, it's just going to expect to be JavaScript functions. So you don't have to really tell ChatGPT to do it in a certain way. You can just ask for a function, and that's it. Okay. Maybe you want to provide some extra context if you want to point to the specific names of the variables. Like hey, as I did before, the variable that it's holding the age, it's v.age. The variable that it's holding the sex, it's, I hope that we get no censor for saying this word. It's v.sex, etc. Okay. And hopefully in the future, when we have ChatGPT integrated in Wiz, which will happen at some point. I'm not going to give an estimation, but it will happen at some point. Most of this context will be provided automatically by Wiz in the background. So you will not have to be explicitly passing that context. You will just be able to write your question, and Wiz will include that extra bit of context that explains the bits that it needs to know in order to generate the proper syntax. Okay. But I'm not giving any estimated time here.
Great. And Teo, if you run into any problems, please contact us on the support channel and we will help you with your formulas and functions. Okay, next question from Yana. Can the user also manipulate the data and change the logic accordingly?
um, it could if they know how to access the JavaScript API. Okay. Let me just talk about this for a second. So everything, the application state that I just showed you, all the variables, cookies, etc., all of this it's also accessible by the public JavaScript API that we have in Wized. Meaning, for example, that if I want to update a variable with custom code, I can do it instead of relying just on the configurator that on the config that I set up in Wized. Okay, so it's accessible. You can update the state of the application, but we have ways of, if you're trying to, for example, gate something, maybe you want to be able to access some private content. There are ways of handling that. So don't think like because the public API is exposed, then suddenly everyone will be able to access private parts of the application and things like that. It's not like it. I would need some extra time to go deep into this, but I can tell you that it's just for convenient, and it's safe to use. You can use it.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Next question from Casper. Would you say that Wized similarly is a good stepping stone to enhance my understanding of JavaScript?
Absolutely. Yes. And this is what we are aiming for. We want you to learn HTML and CSS with Webflow, and we want you to become a pro at JavaScript with Wist. Okay. But do, do not feel afraid of what I just said, because it's not the other way around. I'm not saying that you have to be proficient in JavaScript to be able to use Wist. I'm saying that with very basic knowledge, you can write many, many complex things in Wiz. And the more familiar you get with the platform, the more that you might want to experiment with, and the more your understanding of JavaScript hopefully will enhance.
Great. And using ChatGPT, I think it's a very good co-pilot to write code
Yep.
snippets. And with practice, we will get better with writing those prompts and understanding how the code works.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. So Robert is asking, are you planning any performance upgrades? JavaScript tends to be heavy.
Yep. If you are really interested in that, please check out the last live stream that we did when we presented the updates that are coming up, because a big part of what we call the embed 2.0, which is the new version of the engine that it's running on the your site, it has been rewritten with performance in mind. There are huge performance upgrades when it comes to rendering lists, to interacting with elements, to performing requests. There are many performance upgrades that are coming there. So stay tuned.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Question from Mekusa. How do I build a Canva-like platform using Wizd, or a way for people to share their sketch/graphic of a design for submission?
Of a way for people to share their sketch graphic of design for submission. So you would love to be able to create some graphic design, but do you want people to also be able to edit the graphic design on the site, or just share it? So I create my design of, I don't know, with Photoshop, and then I use the platform to share it.
So in Canva, you can create your own design. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like Photoshop, but I guess a simplified
Mm-hmm.
version of it.
Mm-hmm.
And from there you can share it or download it in various formats. So you can.
I think that you could create it. I mean, everything is possible if you know enough coding. I'm just going to say that. So there are things and things that you can do. Everything can be achieved either with just native Wist, so with um, setting up variables and actions that affect the UI, and then sending out data and receiving data. You can build, like, I don't know, I'm going to say up to 90% of things. But then if there are some very specific use cases, like, hey, I want to be able to drag and drop stuff, I want to be able to generate a PDF from what I just dragged on the screen, etc. At that point, maybe you need to add some extra bit of code that goes on top of Wist with the public APIs that we provide, the JavaScript APIs, that implement that extra functionality that maybe it's not native directly built in Wist. So I'm just gonna say you can do it. If I had to explain how, that would be pretty hard because I need to know some extra information. like how should the UI look like, what how would be the experience of creating something like that. Am I dragging dropping stuff, am I just clicking around? We need some extra context, but maybe in the future we could do the live stream doing something like that. I don't know, it's kind of
So
like a tricky challenge.
so Mekusa followed up saying design also done on Wized. So can we like
Yeah,
design
what I was
things?
mentioning. As I
Okay,
mentioned, you can do it if you know if you know how to write the integration with the public APIs. You can integrate, I don't know, some custom code for interacting with the canvas, because in JavaScript you can create canvases. Well, in HTML you can interact with them with JavaScript, and then you can use some library to take a screenshot of that canvas. There are libraries for that. So all you it would take is you knowing exactly how to interact with the canvas with JavaScript, and then knowing how to use the public API to run the required JavaScript libraries to take a screenshot of that canvas. So it's possible, but it I would need some extra time to go and explain properly this.
all right. Thank you for that answer, Alex. So DJ Maxwell is asking, I have an upcoming project to build a next door type app for this community. I was going to build it in Bubble, but would it be better to build it within Wized?
I mean, my answer is probably going to be yes, because everything is possible in Wiz, so you definitely can do it. I don't know how to answer that more specifically. I'm just gonna say that I Nextdoor type app. Oh well, the problem is that I don't know exactly what's Nextdoor. Do you know it? Do you know
Me
that?
too. No, I don't know it either, but by the name of it, I can guess it is something like a neighborhood app where you could probably post ads for things to sell or things to give
Mm,
away. This is just my guess based on the name. Um,
mm.
and yes, I think we can definitely build it in Wisp. And in fact, it would be better because you can use Webflow to design the UI. And Webflow is one
And
of the best UI builders.
yeah, and you have full ownership of everything, of the database, and you can always export the site, etc. In Bubble, usually you're kind of locked in the platform. So everything related to all the data that it's handled for the site, all the user base, all the designs, all the implementation of the HTML and CSS, that would be full ownership for you. Um, Wiz doesn't really hold back any ownership because you get the project configs too. So if you want to run your logic on top of that, you can always do it. Um, so it depends on what you care about. Um,
Sure.
I don't have a definite answer there.
Yeah, so DJ Maxwell follows up saying that it's a Facebook like social media app, and I can confidently say that we can definitely build something like that using Wized.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
one more question from Robert. They ask, do you have any ETA on when the We Do upgrade might be coming?
In less than a month, as I mentioned before.
Great.
So no specific day, but we have a sprint going on, and it's set to be maximum of this upcoming month. So that's the expected time.
Right. So I'd like to just say one thing. So Penny had been talking about the example that we shared earlier, that it seems similar to the one that Jonas Schmetman shared. It's similar because I am learning JavaScript following the course. So that is why we have that similarity. It's the course that you recommended, Alex.
Oh, nice.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So do you
What
have
does it look like? The course. I think I'm not following.
the example we did with like the man and woman, alcohol level,
Oh,
and the
oh,
age?
really?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay.
that is similar to what Jonas presents. And I came up with the idea when we were
Oh,
discussing because I'm following the course.
okay, okay. That's nice. I didn't
Yeah.
know that. Nice,
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm it because Penny was having a chat about it earlier with someone else. Okay,
nice.
then, Alex, do you have any closing remarks for the stream?
That's it. I mean, well, of course, I'm gonna say thank you everyone for being here. Just give a try to Wist. It might seem scary at the beginning, but As it happens with Webflow, the more you use it, the more you not only you become proficient with the tool, you become proficient with the underlying um, concept that powers with, which is JavaScript plus HTML and CSS from the Webflow side. So just try it out, try to build stuff. The more you build, the more you learn, the more proficient you become. And the moment you realize you suddenly became a full blown developer. And this is really nice.
Great, great final words, Alex. To everybody watching the stream, please share your feedback with the Airtable form. Victoria, could you please share that link? We're definitely listening to everything that you have submitted, and we will reply to you, go over them, discuss it internally. And as always, like and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share this with people who you think may benefit from watching the video. Thank you, everyone, for joining. See you next time. Take care.